Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, Resignation Nightmares. Never quit your job like this. Before we dive in, I want to remind everybody listening that we have an amazing 2024 planner that you can pick up on Amazon. This is one of the best planners, the best planner that I've ever come across. Ron and I compiled it ourselves. You must get it and get it in time for the holidays. It makes a great gift. And like it or not, Christmas is right around the corner.
Sure is. Remember, everybody, the Forward with the number 4, Forward High Performance Planner. You won't regret it.
Yes, you will not. So back to our episode. We haven't talked much about resignation till now, and there's plenty on it. So people have gone to great lengths when quitting their jobs. And in today's episode, we will discuss shall we say, quirky ways that people have quit their jobs and the proper way to resign from your job. And this is important, how you as the leader should act when one of your employees communicates their resignation to you. Ron, before we dive in, there are a lot of stories floating around online regarding employers poorly handling resignations. And actually, the number one most discussed was resentment coming from the employer following the employee's resignation. What is going on?
Well, there's no doubt sometimes when people leave, it puts the business at risk. It puts pressure on the other employees. All of that's realistic. But I always tell leaders, be a door. Be a doorway, not a door. And so many people don't understand, and we'll talk about it later, but it's so important to allow people to move on. And the interesting part is most leaders have moved on. They've resigned, but yet when it gets personal to them, they want to hold people up. So, it's a great point. But, Kristin, you want to have a little bit of fun before we get too far into this?
Always.
I was going to talk about how I quit a summer job. It's still regret. I quit under bad terms, but maybe that'll come back up. But anyway, I love these. And you used the word quirky. They're funny. But this is how some people have chosen to resign their job. And Kristin, why don't you give them a 1 to 10 on creativity, okay, after we do this?
Rate them, yes. I'm into
this individual named Joey, he got his marching band. As he quit his hotel job, he had the marching band play as he announced his resignation. What do you think of that?
Wow. I'll give it a 10.
I give that one a 10 as well.
I feel like I remember seeing that. This was within the last 5-10 years. And yikes. Yeah. That's a lot of energy being put into that.
This one was at a store. Someone used the intercom announcement to announce their resignation, ensuring all colleagues and customers heard the news.
Yeah. I'm going to go, I've seen that quite a few times online. I'm going to go a 5. It's humorous, but not most effective.
Well, I think most people that...
Because the clients hear it too, or the customers.
Yeah, and I think most people that do that are not trying to be funny. I would say they're pissed, to be honest with you.
I exactly. I'm like visualizing someone like jumping around on top of all the fruits and vegetables at a grocery store with a mic. Like, it's not a good scene.
Now, I've seen a lot of these. This is a news from a newsreel. This was a live on air resignation. Anchor Liz Wall resigned live on air due to ethical and moral challenges with the network's ownership. And I've seen 2 or 3 news people resign and basically state while they resigned. One person used a lot of expletives as on their way out.
Wow. Nice. I'm going to give that a 10 because it's just ballsy and I enjoy a bold move. I think you can do it without cursing. So I'd say have that planned out better because sometimes your audience may be people that like children. And so you want to be careful with that. But I think it's ballsy, so I like it.
Gave it a 10. I don't want to taint the vote here, but man, this is called the emergency slide escape. Steven Slater, a flight attendant, quit his job by announcing his resignation over the plane's loudspeaker grabbing some beers and sliding down the emergency slide. I'm sorry.
Okay, so wait, I need more. I don't know if there's more information on this out there, but was this before they took off, after they landed? I don't know, but either way, let's go 11 on that one. I should have saved my tens.
If he went down an emergency slide, it was probably after they landed. But the fact that he grabbed beers, I wonder if the airline was really particular, they could charge him with petty theft or something, just to
oh my
to
goodness,
get him.
yeah.
But I would like to
Unless
have
you're
seen
in
that
California, it has to be $1,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Go big.
This one was probably the one I would do, Kristin. It's the interpretive dance video.
Oh boy.
Marina Schifrin made a video set to Kanye West's Gone to announce her resignation from a company that makes viral videos, which itself went viral. What's the irony?
That's pretty funny. I'm not a huge fan of dancing, so but it's funny. I'm going to go like 8 on that one.
Oh, I think I might give that a 10 just because it's interpretive dance. I think it's so funny.
Interpretive, that part is funny. I need to see it.
What else we got, Kristin?
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Well, I pulled up a handful of unique resignations myself, and here's one. And I've seen this a few times, a resignation cake. So an employee baked a cake with her resignation letter written on it as a sweet farewell. So, as I read these, what do you think, Ron? I'm just curious on that one. Why don't you rate that one?
Well, I had someone do that, and I ate the letter accidentally. So...
Are you being serious?
I'm joking.
I'm like, I don't know with you sometimes. I'm like, what is happening? I could imagine, I'm thinking these roles that people are quitting this way from are generally like a lower paying entry level role.
I would think so. Can you imagine you pull out and you can't read it? It's wet. You're like, what's in this cake?
Oh, dear Lord. I'm like, what is happening? I'm imagining it was written in frosting. And I thought what does it just say? I quit. You can't write too much.
I thought the letter was inside the cake. Oh, I see. Who knows?
I'm thinking it was written in
I thought
frosting.
they baked a cake around the letter.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to say probably not, but that would be hysterical.
All right. Then
my goodness.
If the decoration was really creative and artistic, I'll give them an 8.
An 8, good solid 8. What about this? A desktop message. A coworker left a digital goodbye message on their desktop for others to find as a surprise resignation.
I do like that because, word travels. When someone sees it, they're going to go get everyone else.
Yeah.
It depends what it says. But I got to give that one. I'm going to give that one an 8 also.
It's interesting because I immediately go, did they also let their leader know that they were leaving? Did they let HR know, or did they just let word spread? I don't know. So lots of questions
we got
here.
Questions.
We've got, we want some deets. A hidden farewell. In a playful twist, an employee posted pictures of themselves in random places at work, such as the back of a clock, only to be found after they had left. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like a puzzle. You have to put it together.
Yeah.
And then after a week, you're like, man, I still haven't figured it out, but I haven't seen the individual.
But they're not here.
But they're not here.
Yeah. I might need to do a well check on that one.
Again, I would have to see that one. I'll give that a 9.
Yeah.
I'll give that a 9.
Yeah. It definitely took some energy. Yeah. Last one I pulled up here is a poetic goodbye. Another individual submitted their 2-week notice in the form of a poem, adding a literary touch to their departure.
So it was like...
Big fan of poems, Ron?
Like roses are red, violets are blue. I am sick of looking at you.
As far as I go, too. Oh, man. Yeah, that one.
If it was poetic enough, I'd give that a 9.
Oh, man. I want to hear you mentioned earlier that you resigned, and it wasn't your quintessential resignation.
No, it wasn't. And I'm believe it or not, Kristin, do you have, I have events in my life. I don't like to let the past bother me. I really don't. And I try to always be forward thinking. But if I could, there are a few events in my life that I would go back and alter. And this
same.
is one. I was working a summer job. And what makes this worse is I went to the owner of the company. He was building houses. His daughter went to college with me, and I liked his daughter. So she recommended me and a couple other guys to work for her dad. She didn't bother to tell us that her dad was a total dick. So
minor details
she left out. But here's the point. He would not cut you any slack. And by the way, I don't even know. I think I was working hard at age 19. Who knows? But it was hot, and I remember getting up in the top of the ceiling and rolling out that insulation, that fiberglass insulation, gets in your eyes, gets in everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I came down to get water or something, and he jumped on me for that. And I mean, it was a nightmare. But when I decided to quit, I grabbed a paintbrush and I painted like 3 doorknobs on my way up, brand new doors.
No way.
I was so pissed. Yes, I did it. The story gets better. I was speaking in Richmond, Virginia, and was having dinner with my college roommate. I kid you not, this just happened, and I forgot to tell you this, Kristin. He literally said to me, man, remember that summer we worked for? And he mentioned his name, and I'd forgotten that he was one of the workers. And I said, yeah. And I said, I'll tell you. I said, that still bothers me. I said, I painted 3 doorknobs. I kid you not, Kristin. He goes, you're telling me I had to clean them.
Oh, no. How it all comes full circle.
Everything I do comes full circle, it seems.
Oh, my goodness.
But yes,
yeah.
I regret that. It was not a professional job. It was word of mouth. You know, it wasn't like someone was going to give me a reference. I just regret it morally. I don't regret quitting. I just should have got my little butt out of there and not made my little immature statement.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Well, hey, I think that's big of you to look back on that and say, yeah, I would have done that differently.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have. I'll just put this in there. I have a story for you guys later, but it's not how I did. I haven't resigned in a weird way or a way I regretted, but I've had an employer handle my resignation very poorly. So I will share that later when we start discussing employers.
Yeah. So let's look at some. We've already touched on some things, but let's do a deep dive into why it's important to resign properly. Now, again, the one I did in a summer job may not have come back to bite me, but in another circumstance, it certainly could have.
Yeah.
A negative way to resign from a job could involve leaving abruptly, that we've talked about, without giving notice. In other words, you're intentionally putting the company in a bad state, failing to provide a transition period for an employer. And this can be problematic in positions where training a replacement or redistributing workload is essential. And in a small business, I talk to a lot of small business owners. When someone quits, sometimes it's devastating. And without giving notice, and I pick on the food and bev industry a lot, but I was talking to a restaurant owner, and, people will just jump ship. They bounce around. And he was wishing that somehow restaurant owners could start holding people a little more accountable, instead of just saying, yeah, come on over, we have an opening, because I think that might minimize it. But it really does hurt businesses and companies when you don't give them enough time. You don't show them the respect. And we'll talk about it more, but a 2-week notice is customary. It's not a law, but everybody says, did you give your 2-week notice? It's just one of those things. So it's a professional courtesy. And the 2-week notice period is a conventional standard that allows employers time to prepare, train, do whatever they have to do. I've had situations, and I will tell you, in the academy, the way we were trained, you had to do all of this stuff that I needed more time than 2 weeks. I needed at least 30 days. Yeah. And most people knew that, understood that, and honored that. But you always have exceptions. You have those people who are immature and they want to send a message, and certainly they do that. All right. According to a survey, the majority of people, which is 61%, believe that giving a 2 weeks notice is appropriate when resigning from a job. However, 11% of respondents said that less than 2 weeks notice is acceptable, and 10% reported they left right after submitting the resignation without serving any notice period. The data suggests that a significant minority of employees do not adhere to the traditional 2-week notice period when quitting their job. I think there's a lot of variables, and this is in no way meant to minimize certain types of jobs. But again, I think if you're working at McDonald's, it may or may not matter because you've got all these people you can shuffle around. But if you're in a white-collar professional environment, you got to think about that. It's not a good thing to leave your employer in a lurch. We'll talk more about it.
No. And there should be some, there should be some type of accountability there. And I know that, like, for instance, the 3 banks that I've worked for, there was always if you don't give a 2-week notice minimum, you are going to be deemed unrehirable. And I've had a few people that gave less than a 2-week notice, and I made sure to say, okay, you are aware that this is what comes from giving less than 2 weeks. Yes, I'm aware, yada, yada, right? Some excuse. But then I've had employers, one in particular, worked at the same company, say, oh, this is like down the road. So-and-so worked for you. They didn't give you a full 2-week notice. Now they're applying for a job on my team. And can we waive the unrehirable component? And that's up to, I've always put it, that's up to the hiring manager. If you want to take that risk, that's on you. And I'll tell you what, both times didn't work out. They were gone within 6 months. So there's a reason for that. There's a behavior that comes along with not giving a 2-week notice. And it's a respect thing, and it's how somebody operates.
You know, Kristin, that's a great example. And here's where the legality comes in. You have to be very careful if you're giving someone a job reference. In other words, they didn't ask you to be a reference. You're giving negative information about someone. That can open you up to a lawsuit from the individual. But it's certainly, in some instances, there are ways. You better seek legal and HR. There's ways to let people know maybe that they weren't a positive employee. But in general, all you can provide is the dates of employment. If someone jumps around a lot, that might speak for itself. But you mentioned something else important.
Yeah.
A company has a full right to have that 2-week notice in writing, but the prospective employee has to sign that. They're acknowledging, I will give you 2 weeks notice.
Right.
And that's a good thing that small businesses especially might want to think about.
Yeah, not enough small businesses do that at all. So jumping into... let's go into actual resignations and how people have planned for this, because I find this really interesting. So get this, Ron. A survey of 2,000 employees in the United States revealed that 59% contemplated quitting their jobs and already had a resignation letter ready, but they hadn't sent it. So they basically planned this out. They put the time and effort into it. So that's 59%. Also, those who had recently quit reported giving an average of 5 weeks notice in advance of their resignation, which is fabulous. That shows a lot of respect. I've had people do that with me. And so this suggests, basically these two data points suggest that a significant number of Americans prepare resignation letters and consider their exit in advance, often providing more than the traditional 2 weeks notice. So I love that. The number is 59%. I do see that number. This is recent. This is a recent study. I see that number going down every year because of the different millennials, Gen Z. They just are wired differently, and we've been really lax in the workforce, I would say. What do you think about my projection there?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Kristin, I wanted to add, this is a consideration for our listeners. I gave about 6 to 8 month notice when I was going to retire. Now, I was an academy director, so of course, there's a lot of variables and a lot of moving parts. But I did not put it in writing until 3 months before, and I did that to protect myself. I called the head of our system and I said, here is my projected retirement date. I want you to be aware. If you need me to do anything, I'll help you write the job description. Whatever you need me to do, I will do, and I will get that in writing to you 3 months prior. There was some things going on, such as I know the pandemic came a little bit after, but there was a lot going on, so I did not want to put that in writing until I was absolutely sure of, I was writing a book, starting a company. I was checking to see how much my retirement was going to be. There was a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay to give notice and say, I will put this in writing at this particular time. I think that's a respectful way to do it. But you got to protect yourself in some situations as well, because trust me, especially big corporations, the government, all these things may or may not have your back, and I would lean toward may not.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really interesting. So you think it's a given. You would think this is a given, but it's not. So when resigning, using harsh or insulting language in a resignation letter is not acceptable. I would hope that everyone listening to this would understand that. But the wild thing is, no matter what industry, people are inappropriate in resignation letters. And I will say, I've read some. Remember when in 2020, when the police were dealing with the riots all over the nation, I know that a lot of the resignation letters here in the Northwest were made public, and those I understood, and they weren't cursing out their leaders, but they were being very blunt on why they left the police departments. And that made complete sense to me. They're making a statement. Exactly. And that was actually a breath of fresh air to read. But for the rest of us that aren't dealing with that circumstance, we need to be professional, because it will come back and get you if you're not. So don't use harsh or insulting language in a resignation letter. Don't be confrontational or air grievances in an unprofessional manner during an exit interview. Don't damage relationships with colleagues or supervisors on the way out. It's just a bad look. And you're, like you said earlier, you had a door reference. You will close doors by doing that. And you're going to burn bridges. You can potentially harm future employment opportunities. It's always recommended to resign in a manner that is professional and considerate to all parties involved. Even though you might want to put them in their place, rightfully so, right? But just refrain from doing so. And I wanted to share. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
You mentioned an exit interview, and that's a time where I've seen employers be very hypocritical. They want an exit interview. They claim they're going to use the data as a means to improve the corporation, the culture, and all that, and yet they're infuriated when someone provides a legitimate, honest exit interview. So And I will tell you, Kristin, I did exit interviews, and there was a few times I felt my blood boiling that I wanted to go, that's because you did, but I understood you just got to take the exit interview.
Just
but
take it.
If you get a reputation that you better not tell this individual something on the exit interview because they're going to use it against you, then you've undermined, there's no psychological safety in that.
Right.
And you're not going to get the truth.
Exactly. Yeah, you're spot on. And I have to tell you, it was really interesting. Generally in the banking industry, if you're leaving one bank for another bank, especially one that's competitive in the same region, when you gave your resignation letter, it's just a known thing that you were going to be let go that day. They pay you through, the 2 weeks, but because you're going to a competitor, you can no longer work there because they run the risk of you telling your clients where you're going. The people who work under you want to follow you. So there was one instance where I was going from a large bank that I had worked for 7 years or 8 years to another one. And there happened to be a location down the street. So I had just known, I put my resignation letter together. Everything was I had a great relationship with my leader, with my team. I just knew as soon as I gave this to him that I was going to be cut. And I had already made plans for that mentally and had packed some of my stuff up that was at my desk. Well, we were talking and I gave him my resignation letter. And this was really interesting. I think he completely broke the mold with this move. He had me work out, like literally work my full 2 weeks notice. And which was so unorthodox because I was leaving to go to a bank that had a location just down the street, right? And so that was really interesting. It took me back, that's for sure. But what I made sure to do within that 2 week period is I didn't tell my team where I was going. I didn't tell my clients where I was going. And you just have to remain professional. I think he kept me on because he knew I could do that. And not only he didn't want to have a managerless location, but also he knew I was a professional. And so that's how you want to go out. We have a great relationship to this day. What are your thoughts on that, though, when you have a competitor down the road?
No, if you're an employer, there's certainly times that you have to cut the strings. You got to let someone go, because if the wrong kind of person can undermine and do a lot of damage during that 2-week period. Obviously, you had built a reputation. We've talked about that a lot.
Right.
They trusted you. And that's a very good sign. But to the contrary, there are situations where I've seen people get walked out of buildings, as a matter of fact, more than once.
Yeah.
Because they let them go in and get their belongings or whatever from their office, and they're escorted off the premises. So it really depends on the situation, the reputation.
Right.
And of course, I dealt with some high security stuff, so that is always a consideration. But I think that's
right.
positive on your part, and I think employers and employees have to handle that the best way. But you said something else I wanted to hone in. We're going to be talking more about this in a later episode, oversharing. And even though I called the head of our system and the deputy and told him I was going to be resigning or retiring at the end of June, I did not tell staff. I did not tell anyone. Then my middle managers or my 2 deputies, I brought them in about a month or 2 later. I don't remember. And I told them. And then it was another probably 30 to 60 days before I told staff, because I certainly wanted to make sure everything was going through before I told staff.
Yeah.
I will tell you something that people should know this. You may be a good leader. Let's say someone's a principal of a high school and all the teachers like that person. But if you've got several people who want to be principal or vice principal, trust me, they're not going to miss you too bad. They might have enjoyed working with you, but there's a lot of ambitious people. So I've been asked, even on podcasts, like, how did people accept my retirement? I said, pretty good. Because they're looking, they know it trickles down. If you fill my position, there's going to be a deputy position, then there's going to be a team lead position. So, and by the way, the world goes on. So, some of these people think they're making they're sending a message to their employer. But guess what? As important as you are, life goes on. And then for employers, they think they're the only business in town, but a lot of people who resign go on to bigger and better things. So we got to stay grounded in both arenas of that, from employer to employee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. You're going to share with us the proper way to resign.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay. This is important. Review your employment agreement. There may be caveats in there that you're not sure about, because that is your guideline. That is the lamppost that you want to follow. And if there is a required notice period, you're under a contractual obligation to fulfill that, as we said. You should always prepare a letter. You don't want to just go in and tell someone, because the formal resignation letter will serve as official documentation if there's ever any kind of lawsuit or anything that happens. So, and in that letter, you do have to put your intent to resign. I only know of this happening once, but someone wrote a letter, but they never really said they were resigning. That's that accuracy, brevity, and clarity that you want in your writing. The effective date of resignation, of course, adhering to any notice period requirements. And it's always a good thing to thank your employer for the opportunity you've had during employment. Even if there's some things you don't like, this person still, or this company still hired you, they still paid you, they still allowed you to, feed your family, let's say. Right. So there needs to be some type of gratitude. We're not telling you to lie. If you're absolutely dissatisfied, you can still say, I've learned a great deal at this company. Thank you for any opportunities to grow and advance. Something like that.
Right.
Kristin, it's funny. I had a section in my book that didn't make it, maybe in a future book, but it was called The Truth About Truth. And the example I used is, let's say you've got someone retiring that no one likes. And if you're the head, if you're emceeing, facilitating this retirement, you got to get up and speak. And I remember one time I had to speak, and I wanted to get up and I write funny in my book. I'm glad we won't see your backbiting face on Monday. It's the greatest thing that's happened. But anyway, I put in there how you can write, like, thank you for your service to the government. It was just really a humorous look at, you can't always be totally honest. People love to throw around the word integrity like a baseball. But there's unique situations because you just can't get up and say what everybody's thinking. You can, but it's probably not going to bode well.
You're going to not hold a job or friendships or relationships.
Yes. In addition to thanking them, you should always offer assistance in the transition. Whatever I can do to help my replacement, please advise, whatever.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You mentioned you did that earlier. That's huge. I've definitely done that. When someone's taking over my team, when I've moved on, I'm like, okay, so here's where we're at. Here's what this person's strengths and weaknesses, right? You always you don't want them to go in blind. It looks bad on you. You have the intel, you want to share it. All right. So I think the way to do this, and this is how, even this last situation, when that I was referencing when I resigned, you want to schedule a meeting with your supervisor. It's respectful to inform your supervisor of your resignation in person. I could have done it on the phone and email. That's not the proper way to do it. Do it in person unless you work remote, and that's just not something you can do. At least do it over a video chat, right? Like we have to dive more into, we're going to do an episode on remote work and all the caveats that come along with it. But in person, if you can, before submitting the letter. So a meeting provides an opportunity to discuss your departure and any necessary transition plans, like you're talking about, Ron. Transition plans, how you can help rebuild the team. You want to submit your resignation letter after your conversation, at least formally submit it to your supervisor. And if required, I know at the banks, we also had to send it directly to HR so that they had it in their files. Sometimes leadership would do it on your behalf, but you want to follow up and make sure that they received it. That's important. You want to work through your notice period. Yeah. Work through your notice period, right? Continue to perform your duties professionally during your notice period. This may involve training your replacement or documenting processes for the next person in your role. I can't stress that enough.
And Kristin, I'm glad you said that because I know so many people who take sick leave during that time. There's not a lot the employer can do, but I saw many people who were retiring. They would just burn up sick leave because they didn't feel
right.
With the government, you only get half credit for the sick leave. And when I say half credit, it's just added on your time of service. So it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
So, but don't be that person that you're pretending you're doing your resignation, you're doing all the stuff, and then you take sick leave and you're not any benefit. That's not a good way to exit. We mentioned this, but prepare for your exit interview. Some companies, and if they're worth their weight, they're going to have an exit interview, or if your position is important enough, and it should be. And be sure to let them know, like be honest but diplomatic, to say, here's a few things that I think could be improved upon. And just say it that way instead of you shouldn't, you did this. Don't make direct statements like that. Just say, here's some suggestions, but you want to have explanations. You can't just say, we need to have, this station down the hallway. You need to be able to say why. Give specific examples. Right. You can't just give generalities and expect anything to improve.
Yeah.
Yeah, enough on that.
All right. All right. So moving on, this is something I talked about. I've been seeing this all over LinkedIn. And this is really how an employer should respond to a resignation. And I mentioned earlier, I have a story. There was one time where I worked for, it was a small marketing firm. It was outbound calling, so basically telemarketing. And I was the assistant manager of this outfit. And I had gotten the job at the bank. And so I put in a 2-week notice. And within an hour, I was being escorted out. So you mentioned escorted out. It wasn't because I did anything wrong. They were so mad at me, and they thought that I was going to apparently take everybody with me, and I was literally escorted out. I couldn't believe it. But I remember feeling like I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I already packed all my personal effects up. So it wasn't like I needed to quickly gather everything. But it was the oddest feeling because it was so unwarranted. But it's really obvious that company was ran very unprofessionally. So it makes sense that they did it that way. But that was not a great experience for me. But also it looked really bad for them because they're escorting out somebody that I was highly regarded by my team, and people were calling me and texting me, and I'm like, I'm fine, but wow, right?
It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And Kristin, outside of that situation, you should always leave your contact information. This is humorous, but my replacement would call me maybe a couple times a week the first few weeks. Then it was one time a week, and then I wasn't getting any calls. And I joked with her and said, well, I can tell you're checking. I'm not important anymore. You must be catching on.
Yeah.
I said, can't you at least call just to say hello? So we joke about that. We have a good relationship. But I did notice.
That's amazing.
I did notice, though, the calls began to lessen. And
well, it's great that you made yourself available, because there are certain things that it's like I could spend 8 hours trying to figure this out, or I could just call Ron, who could tell me where it's at, how to do it in a few minutes.
I will tell you, Kristin, that it's interesting you said that. And look, this is not going to be the norm. But, I'd been 27 and a half years federal law enforcement, and I'm walking away, and I was struggling. So when I would get those phone calls, it would pull me back into something I'm trying to walk away from. So it was a little challenging. And one time, my replacement, my successor said, I was saying something. I said, what we need to do, and I used we, and she just laughed. She said, you used we. I said, God, don't let me use that again. But anyway, yes, you should be available to help with any kind of transition if you want to be perceived as someone with integrity and someone that leaves for the right reason, for sure.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because even though we want to make ourselves available, that shouldn't be taken advantage of. I definitely, it's almost like calling somebody while they're on vacation. You only do it if there's an absolute emergency, right? Like the system just went down. You're the only one who knows how to fix it. You want to allow that person to move on gracefully, but there are circumstances where they've made themselves available, and on occasion you can reach out. So if you're the employer and you're receiving a resignation from one of your employees, you want to stay professional. I know it can feel like a slap. I've had it before where you have this star employee and you notice them and you've promoted them 3 times, and now they're leaving the company to go make more money elsewhere, and you're happy for them. At the same time, it stings, but you don't want that to be obvious. So stay professional, maintain a positive attitude and professional behavior until the last day. And, you want to make sure that the way they feel through their notice period is how they're going to remember you. You want to leave that door open. You want them to want to think about coming back to work for you. Handle it gracefully. And also, when an employee resigns, an employer should ideally act professionally and with courtesy. And so, for me, let's say I've had a handful of them, but I've always been like, oh my gosh, congratulations. That is so exciting, right? Like, even though it stings, you want to be genuinely happy for people that are going elsewhere especially when they're going for a large increase or a big promotion. And sometimes you have to leave your company to gain those things. And then that doesn't mean you can't come back. But what are your thoughts on that, Ron?
I did have one situation where I moved heaven and earth to get this person back. And they weren't there no time. And I get it. This person's wife had another opportunity in another state. but this person had literally just got their feet wet again and resigned, decided to retire. And they had no idea. It was really difficult for me. Now, I did the whole going away and so forth. I mean, we didn't do the big one like we did the first time. But I was a doorway, not a door. But that one was tough.
Yes.
There's a lot of situations where you're just glad to see someone go. I mean, it's true. And but you got to handle yourself professionally in that regard.
Exactly. I know you're going to talk to us about a transition plan. But before that, I just want to say, don't resent the person leaving. Maybe you're going to a little bit internally. Never make it obvious, and make sure as the employer or the leader, have a discussion with the employee to understand their reasons for leaving. We've talked about the exit, but you can have that as an informal, like maybe generally when someone's resigned, they've told me, I'm leaving for a better work-life balance. They're offering me a huge pay increase. Yeah. It's a big promotion, right? So have that conversation so you can understand where this is coming from.
It's also important to have a transition plan. Now, this is an employer. In other words, you should make the employee an asset for the remaining time that you have them. So you develop, a continuity plan. You get knowledge. You ask them if they're willing to train someone or leave an itemized list of their responsibilities. There's a lot of ways that they can do that, and it depends on the business and the company. But make them an asset, not a liability, as they leave. We've already mentioned an exit interview, but your reputation will precede you. If people know that if they speak the truth in an exit interview, you're probably not, the person's not going to open up. So have a very structured and a relaxed way to conduct that exit interview. Future contact, keep the lines of communication open for potential future rehiring. If they leave and they've still got a good taste in their mouth, and this is someone that you think is very talented, you may be able to win them back. So maybe check in with them.
Right.
There's something that means a lot to me. The number 2, the deputy in D.C., it's rare that a week goes by that he and I don't text. And I'm going to tell you something, Kristin. I found out when you retire, you find out who your friends are. Because there's some people, I can't do them any good. I'm no longer academy director, and boom, I don't hear from them. Radio silence. They ghosted me.
That's bad.
But the ones that have not, I consider them, special to me.
Yeah,
Support
absolutely.
the person, offer whatever assistance you can, work with them, reflect. Use a resignation letter as an opportunity to reflect on the company's culture, salary, benefits, so forth and so on. But an employer should reflect on the good things that the employee has done and reiterate those, and try to have something, a ceremony of some type on their behalf. If you do that, they're definitely going to leave with a positive thought about the company. We always, even when I had people that only came for 3 years, they're assigned for 3 years. We call them detailed staff. We're going to go back. We always met at a local restaurant bar, and we'd give them something. I'd always give them a letter if they did well, things like that, some swag.
Yes.
And man, they left on such a high note. Anyway.
Some exit swag.
Exit swag.
Love it.
So the bottom line is, Kristin, keep that person as an asset before, during, and after they leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already talked about staying positive and try to be as understanding as possible throughout the resignation process. And, you want to keep those connections. Networking, it's 100%. Maybe not 100%. It's 98% who you know. You have to keep your network going. And when you sever because you handled something the wrong way, if you paint doorknobs on the last day.
You had to bring that up. I'm hurting over that, Kristin. You know how delicate I am.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to rack my brain to see if I've ever resigned in an unprofessional way. Gosh, I'm thinking.
I was so pissed. I was so tired. I was so sick of being yelled at that.
I don't blame you. I've never had someone treat me that poorly at a job. So that's a different situation.
Kids, don't paint doorknobs.
Because then you'll meet somebody who had to scrape that
Next
paint
thing you know,
off
you're
at a
smoking
later-
crack. I mean, don't do it.
Oh gosh. But yeah, so we've dove into a lot, and I think that, a lot of it's something that we may take for granted as, oh, we already know, we already operate this way. But I think, the biggest takeaway for me when researching for this episode was how poorly people are being treated actively right now, being treated by employers when they resign. And that is that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So, Kristin, I've got a crazy thought to bring us home. How about this? Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Whoa.
Bam.
Profound.
Thank you. You can't hear the applause, but it's all over.
Right, exactly. Oh, I wanted to say, I still have cards that the teams that either that I was on or that I led, whenever I would leave, I have all those cards. I keep them where they're all signing and saying something nice. And those, little things like that go far.
They really do. Folks, trust me, I'm going to be doing a social media post on don't paint doorknobs soon. It's already, at least I could do that.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, everybody,
Amazing.
We really appreciate you. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.